All right, I think we got to get started, and we will, just adjust as people come in. Um, welcome everyone. I am calling the meeting to order for the Connecticut Career Pathways Student Support Working Group within the Career Connected Learning work stream. And a reminder that this is a public meeting. And what that entails is that the agenda and the Zoom link are posted 48 hours in advance on the OWS website. And the public is invited to join, so you may see other people come to the meeting. That there will be a call to order, a roll call, approval of minutes. That doesn't apply today since we don't have minutes from a previous meeting, and that the meeting is then recorded and posted to the website. So just want to make sure we're all on the same page, just sort of like what is entailed in the public meeting. One question that I had, it seems like, since you all made it here, that the calendar invite is coming through correctly for you, but there was one person who said that the calendar invite was not coming through correctly for them. So anyone have an issue? Does everyone seeing on their calendar 11 to 12 and the Zoom link is working? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I can see it.
Awesome. Okay, and then just a quick reminder that we did all agree to these norms. Let me know if anyone has any questions on them. The one that I will bring attention to is that we are operating in this commission on a first name basis. So yes, it is sometimes awkward for me to call people by their first names, but I am going to do it and appreciate you all doing the same. Um, and just also a reminder that uh, Miguel, not Dr. Cardona, Miguel, has given us the charge to, really be the best in the nation as a state on pathways. And so as we're going through this, how can we be bold? How can we be audacious? How can we really push ourselves to think about big solutions that are going to really impact students? Our agenda for today, for the first 5 minutes, we'll just do our welcomes and introductions. Hi, Jennifer. Nice to see you. Then we'll talk a little bit about the sort of our charge and how student supports fits within the broader context of the project. Then I will turn it over to Jan, who is one of our co-liaisons and is going to walk through what is the framework for how we're thinking about student supports specifically. Then would love to really engage you all about what are you seeing across the state as it relates to student supports, what's going well, what's not. And then we'll do some vision setting. What would really a bold solution look like? Now, we're not talking here about specific recommendations, but just like how would we know that we've met a big, audacious goal? What would be true in the state of Connecticut? And then we'll talk about next steps in closing. So our goal today is want to get feedback from you all of does our framework and the way we're thinking about this issue capture the scope? What do you know about where Connecticut stands? What are we not thinking about that would be helpful to surface from you all? And what does bold look like for you? Last thing I'll say is just that we are going to use a parking lot. So there are going to be some comments that are really helpful and we want to address, but probably are not in scope for this conversation just because we have a lot of content to get through. So just know that we'll be taking those notes, we'll be following up, but we may not address them directly today. Any questions on this before we keep walking through? Awesome. All right, so this is serving as both our roll call and our introductions. So we'll just go through each person and please share who you are. So that is your name, your title, what organization you are representing. What is exciting you? What are you most energized by? What are you hoping to bring to the commission? And then the third thing is how you'll contribute. And so what would be really great here is all of us are coming from really unique vantage points with different experiences, different expertise. How are you going to use your position, your expertise, your lived experience to inform what the commission does? How will you use your networks, et cetera? And so I will start by turning it over to our co-liaison, Jan.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Jan Hockadell. I have a couple titles. I am the president of the American Federation of Teachers here in Connecticut. I'm also a national vice president to Randi Weingarten in Washington, and I'm also a state senator. So I am really excited about this work, especially this exploration part about finding out where we are because we know we have pockets of excellence. And I'm really excited to find out what other states are doing. How do we get every district in Connecticut to have all of those resources, have all those students, have those advantages? So I'm really excited about that. And so I think what I can bring to the table is through AFT, I do have a pre-K 12 council. So I can share information, get feedback from educators, paraeducators, and support staff. I also have the national as a resource. So if we want to know what other states are doing, we can contact them and have that conversation. And also as the senator, finding out, where we are in the legislature and how we can actually push this forward next session. So, thank you.
Awesome. Great. Let's move to Jennifer.
Hey everyone, I'm so sorry I was a few minutes late. Somebody was at my door. Um, I'm Jen Leeper. I am a state representative representing a portion of Fairfield. I'm the House Chair of the Education Committee. I previously worked in the Accountability Office for the State Department of Education, and before that, I was a school administrator. Managing special education and also on a local board of education here in Fairfield. So have worn a lot of different hats in the education space. I am really excited actually to be amongst people who are thinking both urgently and creatively about how we can better meet our kids' needs and match what we're doing in our schools to what the world ahead is going to expect from our kids to set them up to be better positioned for what that world's going to look like. And I think how I can contribute is provide some insights both on my professional experience, but also how we can get tangible policies that will support the work we are going to hopefully propose through the legislature. So, thank you.
Awesome. Larry, let's go over to you.
Thank you. I'm Larry Ward. I'm the president of the University of Hartford in West Hartford, Connecticut. Um, I'm excited about creating an ecosystem from, I would say, K-12 through higher ed, and in particular, bringing my expertise for how private higher institutions of higher ed in the state can support this meaningful work. We often think about public higher education, the Connecticut state system, certainly the University of Connecticut. As a graduate of UConn, I love that. But there are a number of very fine private institutions, including the University of Hartford. At Hartford, we have the largest number of students of any private institution in the state that stay in Connecticut post-graduation to work. And so I think that's an important contribution. I want to understand how our employer connections, our career services professionals can help inform this work.
Awesome. And Tyler.
Hi, I'm Tyler. I'm a student regent on the CSU Board of Regents for Higher Education, and I'm really excited to be able to help students across the state of Connecticut be able to get the support they need to build career paths that are essential to the Connecticut economy and environment. I hope that I'm able to bring a student perspective, primarily from a public higher education perspective, that will be able to get a side that most don't really get, since a lot of students aren't as engaged in these sorts of topics. But I'm hoping that I'm able to bring that perspective to the table.
Awesome. And so it does seem that for roll call purposes, Althea is not here today, Madeline Negron is not here today, and Emily Palin is not here today. And so we'll note that for attendance purposes. I wanted to just quickly introduce Ben and myself. I know we've introduced ourselves before, but really just re-clarify our role here. So Ben and I both work for Social Impact Partners. We have been, tasked with supporting the commission. And so I just wanted to clarify that we're really here in a support capacity. And so We are here to do research. We are here to help draft materials. We are here to help synthesize, crystallize. We are here to arrange primary research if you want to talk to a specific person, or you need a overview or a reading digest. Like really just view us as the support and conduit through which you all can reach your solutions and do this work. Just a little bit about my background. I was a K-12 teacher for 5 years. I taught mostly 8th grade math and science. I then went to business school and following that worked at EY Parthenon, which is a consulting firm with a dedicated education arm where I worked across ECE, K-12, higher ed, corporate education clients, foundations, private investors. So have seen the education sphere from a lot of different angles, but I'm really passionate about systems level change. And so really excited to be on this project. And I'll just quickly turn it over to Ben.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Ben Stang, Director of Social Impact Partners. I'm supporting the working group that's focused on student access. So we're looking into what school models are supporting career pathway programs, how to expand dual enrollment, and how to ensure the credentials are widely available for students. Happy to be here.
And so Ben and I are actually supporting each other's working groups because our work is so interlinked. And we also will be co-presenting on August 13th, which is when the Career Connected Education group is presenting. And so we will be splitting our time. And so we're sort of serving as the link between each other's work. Also, given the fact that it is summertime and people go on vacation, making sure that there's always someone that you can reach out to and that we're staying abreast of each other's work. And then the last person that I wanted to introduce is Michelle. So this project is, being run in concert between the governor and OWS. And so there will be an Office of Workforce Strategy representative in each working group, helping to make sure that all of the, actors are coordinated. And so Michelle is our representative. And Michelle, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I am Michelle Furman. I am from the Office of Workforce Strategy, where I'm a state program manager. However, my background is in higher education and the regional sector partnerships that I spent the last couple of years on the Good Jobs Challenge initiative here in the state of Connecticut, where a great deal of discussion was career awareness and bringing pathways through our different industries through K through 12. So I'm very excited to see this work move forward and more formalized as we move this commission forward. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, we have a great group here. I'm very excited to dive in. And so I'm going to just briefly walk through sort of the framing. Where are we in this project? Where are we trying to get to? How does our work fit in? And then I'll turn it over to Jan to talk specifically about how we're approaching our working group specifically. So the first thing that I think is pretty important for everyone to sort of have in the back of their mind as we're going through the work is our North Star for this commission. I will say it with one caveat that the first working group, the Pathways Design and Governance Group, one of their activities is to further refine this. So there's a chance that it will be shifted slightly, but we needed a working place to start from to make sure we're all moving in the same direction. So our North Star is a system where every student across the state at any phase in their journey can navigate a clear path from learning to a financially stable career, and every employer can find the talent that they need to grow in Connecticut. That is being divided into 4 work streams: Pathways Design and Governance, Career Connected Education, Work-Based Learning, and Statewide Systems. And our working group's mandate is within Career Connected Education. There are 2 working groups. One is Student Access. That's what Ben is leading. And so that will be on dual enrollment, credentialing, school models. How do you get more students on pathways? And then our charge is student supports. So how do you actually support students who are in pathways navigating complex decisions? And how do you also get educators the supports to then support students? So that's where we are in this broader commission. In terms of the project lifecycle, you'll see this blue dash box. This is where we are. So this commission runs from April through February. Our draft report is due on October 20th. The reason for that is that we need to socialize it with legislators, make sure that it is top of mind as the governor is thinking about his budget. We need to do a public roadshow where we're going around the state and getting feedback from folks. And so even though the final report via the executive order is due on February 15th, and via the executive order, the draft is due on the 31st, we are moving on a more accelerated timeline to make sure we can get the necessary stakeholders approved. And the final output is a report. That is what we are driving towards, is a report for the governor due again on October 20th. Along the way, though, we will have 7 meetings, one of which already happened, the kickoff meeting. We are right now gearing up for the meeting on the 25th, which is the discovery meeting. Then each work stream will have a meeting. So on July 9th, it will be Pathways, Design, and Governance. On August 13th, it will be Career Connected Education. On the 27th, Work-Based Learning. On the 1st, Statewide Systems. And then one final meeting on the 20th to align on the report. What questions do folks have on this overall schedule? Great. So the pathway, as I said, or the commission, as I said, is divided into 4 work streams. However, the Career Connected Education work stream is divided into 2 working groups because it's so meaty and there's so much going on. So I just want to talk through a little bit about student supports and what are the sort of subtopics that we're addressing here. So this is student advising, both career and academic, but also like trying to link those a little bit more as though they are one and the same, right? We are preparing kids for whatever academic decisions they're making on the path towards a career that they are inspired by. Career awareness tools, career days, guest speakers, career assessments, all of those sort of supports that get students thinking about what kind of careers are out there and what they might want to do. Then learning frameworks. So what is the sequencing of courses? What kind of CTE curriculum? What kind of project-based learning are we suggesting are best for students who are navigating pathways? And it doesn't necessarily need to be prescriptive, but what are the menu of options and how do we know that those things work? Also, student social capital and belonging. So how are students building the networks that they need in order to, receive internships, to, get exposed to careers? How are they building their network of people who are there to support them and guide them and help connect them to interesting opportunities? And lastly, the educator support. So what are the certifications or trainings or professional learning communities that teachers and educators need in order to make sure that this is all happening on the ground? The last thing that I just want to share on this slide is that we are designing a full career pathway system that is everything from choosing the pathways all the way through the statewide systems that need to be there to support the work. But a career pathway, the way we are defining it, is just these middle 2 buckets. So what are students doing, which is both the education side and the work-based learning side. So that's what we mean when we say a pathway. I'll pause here in case folks have questions.
When we talk about students, do we have a particular age student? Are we talking high school through college, middle school? Where in your minds does student begin?
Great question. I think definitely all of K-12 as well as higher ed students are in scope. I think there's also, though, an argument to be made that we should be thinking about student supports as it relates to adult learners and those who are underemployed or not employed, incumbent workers. There was even some conversation amongst the co-liaisons of like, does this extend down to the supports in, early childhood? So certainly K-12 and higher ed is 100% in scope. And then I think we should be pushing ourselves to think about what about folks sort of that fall outside of that range. I think all of that is fair game for our charge.
Very good.
Anything else here? Okay. This is just a graphic to sort of share the project flow and where we are, the current state, future state, and the barriers to achieving that future state are part of the discovery phase. Any specific solutioneering or creating incentives and feedback loops and systems and structures, that's all going to happen in the next segment after June 25th. So again, we may parking lot some comments. So what does it actually mean to get through the sort of discovery phase at a more granular level? So in the current state, we want to do a landscape analysis of Connecticut, what's actually happening on the ground today as it relates to student supports. We want to identify the bright spots and the pockets of excellence. Where is this going really well? We want to think about outcomes. How are students faring along the key metrics that we identify as important along student supports? And then benchmark Connecticut against other states who are leading the way on this. In the future state, we want to identify best practices, things that we might want to aspire to, and start setting some really bold vision statements. And then in terms of barriers, we want to unearth, why is this not happening already? What is going to make this challenging? What are the issues that different stakeholders are facing? What are the systemic barriers? So that as we're going into solutioneering, we're thinking about, in the context of the real world and the way it works, what do we need to potentially do to make sure that these solutions are happening? Any questions here about where we're going before the 25th? Okay. I am now, thank you for bearing with me. I am now going to turn it over to Jan, who is going to walk us through some of the framing of how we're really going to dive into our specific work stream.
Yeah, thanks, Riley. So as Riley had mentioned, kind of along with the North Star in the framework, the question we're really trying to answer is, what supports does every Connecticut student need to successfully navigate a high quality career pathway? And what can we do to ensure that those supports exist equitably and at scale today? So to answer that question, right now we're in the discovery mode. So what does that part mean? It means the diagnoses. We're going to try and map the current landscape of Connecticut, what supports exist, where they work, where they're absent or inequitable. And then what do we need to learn? This is our research phase. How do we understand what best-in-class student support systems look like, both within our state and nationally? And what outcomes are there from this? So where are we? What would we like it to look like? And then later, as Riley mentioned, we'll be working on identifying the bold, concrete changes or recommendations that we would like to see in the state. So I'll just pause for a minute and see if everybody is okay with that. And, or, you know, if you have any reactions or questions, you can either say them now or put them in the chat. Everybody's okay? All right, I'll move on.
Yeah, I will say, and this is a question that I raised at our kickoff. I think we have to be, I don't know, I struggle many times with a career pathway, just that nomenclature, you know, because I do think that, you know, there are job pathways, there's pathways to securing a particular job. But so often a career involves many different jobs. And we can certainly try to be prescriptive about, you know, specific job pathways, what takes someone from elementary school to their first job. But what the skills that would allow someone successfully in the state of Connecticut to build a career likely cuts across multiple jobs, industries, functions, right? So I look at my man Tyler there. Tyler, what year are you?
I'm going to my senior year.
What do you study?
Political science.
Political science. So do you have an idea of what you want to do with that degree?
Not entirely.
Precisely my point. So with that, with his education in political science, he can have a pretty extraordinary career that will look like a portfolio of experiences. And so I sometimes I struggle with the notion of creating a specific pathway for Tyler's career. if that makes sense.
Larry, I
But
think that's a really great point. And I think one of the goals and the ways we're thinking about this, and I would love to get others' reactions here, is that everything that we're suggesting should, in the end of the day, be stackable because, to your point, this is not linear. And so, just because someone completes a certain training that leads to a specific position, that does not lock them in there. That these are a set of holistic experiences that allow and open doors rather than close them off. And I think that's really important framing as we're thinking about building a pathway, that it is creating more opportunities and nodes rather than narrowing folks in a way that feels counterproductive. And so I certainly think, but would love to hear others' reactions, that where we're moving towards is not helping students secure their first job, but creating a robust set of experiences that prepare students to be able to engage in a number of different opportunities because they are getting the workplace skills and the networking skills and the job experience that is transferable beyond just a single endpoint. So that's my initial reaction to what you were sharing, but would love to hear others' thoughts.
Yeah, I have the same exact thought, Riley. My son attended the Connecticut Technical High School system, and I remember as a ninth grader, they go through exploratory, which means they go to every single shop to see, what they want to take. And he came back and he was dumbfounded. He said, I had no idea these experiences were out there, these possibilities. And I think every student should have that. And it may look different in every district, in every school, but as long as the students are coming away with the idea that there's so many possibilities and avenues that they can go, because we all know it's not a straight path, right? We're always taking rights and left, but somehow we get along the pathway to where we want to go, and we just need to make it easier for students and give them the supports to make that happen.
Thank you. I didn't mean to hijack the
Nope.
conversation.
No, feedback, welcome.
Yeah, these are the kinds of conversations we need to be having to move the work forward. So I appreciate your engagement on the topic.
Yeah. All right. So the way we see it, there are three interconnected buckets, if you will. They shouldn't be silos, so to speak, but they form a system and they all have to work together. So the first one we were looking at was advising, counseling, and navigation. In other words, who or what helps or guides students as we see it right now. And then the learning framework for students, what do they need to be able to know or to do? What does that framework look like that we were just talking about? And then the last part is the educator, staff, and supports, because students can only access the great supports if there are adults that are there to help them and to guide them. And they have to be trained, they have to be certified in order to make that successful. So I'm just going to ask you for one moment, if you could just take a minute and read the bullets in each of those buckets. And then what we'll do is we'll ask if anybody has any questions, or what we're looking for is, are there things that we're missing, or are there things that are unclear? And if anybody has anything, please feel free to just share with us. And again, because we're so limited on time and we have so much we want to do and get across to you, please, if you'd like, just take a note, and you can always email or put it in the chat at any time during this. Any thoughts or questions? Okay. Okay, I guess we'll move on.
And sorry, just to add on, these will be shared after the fact, these slides. There are a number of items where I imagine there will be need to marinate and think and come back to us and reflect. So the conversation does not end here. And we'll actually send a follow-up email that has a number of questions for reflection, where we would love folks to, respond to us, engage further, think about the way that this is all being structured. So not to put anyone on the spot right now. If people have initial reactions, awesome. If not, there will certainly be more time to engage with this framework.
Okay, that's good. Next slide. So here are some of the ways that we thought we could measure those items that were in those three buckets. For example, in advising, counseling, and navigation, what are the data that we could possibly collect? FAFSA completion rate, counselor to student ratio, that type of data. But what is the outcome? And so that's the bolded bullet. So one of the outcomes we're thinking is the percentage of students meeting post-secondary milestones by grade 12. And what do we need for information inputs for that in order for that to become our outcome or way of measuring that buckets? So I will let you read the rest of the indicators, inputs, and the outcomes that we were thinking about.
Some of these are easier to get than others. So I think some of the challenge is going to be like, how do you get some of this data?
Yeah.
One thing I will share is just CAPS. So the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents is simultaneously running a study on career pathways, and they actually put a survey out into the field to all superintendents. And so far, we've gotten a pretty robust response. And so we're able to actually get qualitative data. Well, it's quantitative, but the question types are fairly qualitative, where we can actually see the extent to which this is being implemented at the high school level, at least. What are the ratios? What kind of assessments are students taking? What kind of opportunities are they getting for work-based learning, for dual enrollment, et cetera? So that'll be one input that we can use. We're also working closely with DataLink CT, with CSDE to pull some of the data from the state systems. But also, I think it's really important that if you all have sources or know things that are not necessarily in the data, please share them with us. The more, the merrier. So, for example, Larry, like I wonder, what do you see as potential sort of channels to engage the independent colleges in getting some of this data around, student ratios to counselors or what advising looks like? If you guys have thoughts, like please do share them. And it doesn't have to be right now, but in an offline capacity, the more data we can get, the better.
Can I?
I'm thinking that each of the universities, most of them anyway, will have a career center that publishes annually, their career outcomes assessment, right? The question though is, how do we relate that specifically to the state of Connecticut, right? Meaning they're Connecticut schools, so that's one way. But do you want to be assessing, students who come from New York, right? And they go back to, they get a career job in California or wherever. So, yeah, so that's just a complicating factor.
Great point. Jennifer, did you have something you wanted to share too?
I was just thinking on the prior slide and also on this one, thinking about what, like, for example, K to 5, how that fits in with this. I think it's distinct and often sort of we talk K-12 all the time, but what K-5, K-8, I think it's a little easier often to envision how 6 through 8 plays into the pipeline, but what we want to be fostering and supporting in the K-5 environment to have kids well positioned, right, to choose their pathways, et cetera, et cetera. So just like kind of putting a pin in that, and maybe that's like a parking lot conversation, but I don't want to lose sight of it. And if you go, sorry, back to the other slide, Jan, I'm not sure if you're the one who's managing the
I'm
slides.
sorry.
Thank you. Having worked in the performance office, and so doing lots of data collection and analysis, it will have unique impacts, right, on what our schools do once you put the spotlight on something. So if we say FAFSA completion rates, I can imagine a world in which our wealthy districts will require FAFSA completion, right? And maybe that's fine, and maybe that's what we want, or maybe not, because that takes time away from other things. Just throwing out those types of phenomenon. And similarly, I would be interested in delving more into what the students meeting post-secondary milestone means. Like, are these student selected milestones? What sort of milestones are we talking about? And then how exactly we're going to measure that? And I know that was already brought up, but the measurement is really tricky. And relying on employers, for example, right, to complete surveys will have some like data reliability questions, probably. Again, and I'm just throwing sort of these things out. I'm sure none of this is novel, but things for further consideration.
That was
Super
excellent.
helpful. I will say that that last bullet on the first column is specifically in relation to the student success plans. So now that every student, high school student, has to have a student success plan, they outline things they want to achieve by grade 12. So it is measuring against that specifically. Again, I'm not sure how accessible that data is. I know that like every student has to have a success plan, but how are schools actually tracking whether students are meeting those goals may be a whole other conversation. And then I really like your point about the younger grades. I think a lot of the research right now, as I'm sort of like combing through, is saying that the earlier that you're engaging students, the more impact that this has. And you can't start in ninth grade. You're like missing the boat by starting in ninth grade. And I can certainly forward on some of the articles that I've read that are sort of related to that if it's at all helpful. And then I just wanted to make one clarification that none of these ideas around measurement would be things that we are newly asking schools to measure before the 25th. Like this is all our data collection. However, there is a work stream, that last work stream, that is going to be rethinking what is the accountability system, what is the data system, what do we need to collect. And so I think your point is well taken that we need to be really thoughtful that like what you measure impacts what people do. And also around FAFSA specifically, one of the thoughts is that now that workforce Pell is becoming a thing, even if kids are not going to a four-year institution, because there's a chance that they could have access to short-term training Pell dollars, that maybe it is still a good measure. But I think that's very much open for debate and we should like continue talking about it. So those are just a couple of quick reactions. Sorry to speak for
no, that's okay. I think it was a perfect question, Jennifer, because if you see at the bottom, it says for homework, we're asking what other additions or changes would you suggest in each of the buckets? And if I hear you correctly, addressing some of the earlier education might be some of the things that you've already put into law, like literacy data, math data, because we all know if you don't have those foundations, then you're pretty much shot for the rest of it. Like trying to play catch up, as we learned through COVID, is so hard. So maybe some of the information that we need to add as well.
And thank you. I just want to add, I'm like really happy to see the educator and staff supports column, because I do feel like often we require so much of our educators and then we're not doing sort of like either the front end or the support for folks who are mid-career, right? When we've changed our expectations for them along the way. And it's so, as you guys know, it's super important to set our educators up to be successful, right? With what we're asking them to achieve.
Yeah. No, very good. Okay, so as I mentioned, please take a look at your homework, and just on that slide, we'd love more input because we know we need more data, and that gives us better outcomes as we go along. So this is what we want to measure or be able to measure, the items on the previous page. In order to do that, we have to understand where we are today in Connecticut. For example, 78% of Gen Z students say it's important to determine career plans before graduation, but only 13% of our students feel that there ready or prepared to do that. Our ratio to school counselors, one counselor for an average of 385 students. Oh my gosh, I can see their halos now. And we should also recognize that the recommended ratio is 1 to 250 students. So that's where we are. We know where, the ideal is. How do we get there? And then 64% of community college students have never used career counseling services. And I think Larry was saying that, before, to choose their pathway. So where we need to look at where we are right now, in order to know what do we need to research in order to get to the next phase. So again, I'm going to ask, because we're running out of time for homework, if you could also think about other indicators or ways to measure that previous page, that would be fabulous. Riley, do you have anything to add for that?
I would just share that the 1 to 385 is a national statistic. We know that Connecticut actually is doing a little bit better on this front, but it is very inequitable as you look across districts. So if you look at the average, it is masking huge disparities. And so one of our charges is around equity, and we still need to get under the hood of this data a little bit more before we say like Connecticut is doing great on this and really like think about regionally what is happening. And the last thing that I would share is like, these things don't work in isolation. There needs to be a system. And, a lot of the research is saying like, if you don't have the student support piece, the rest of the recommendations fall apart. And so I think like, it's easy to sometimes cast aside like counseling, but like, it's actually really critical to the work that we're doing. So that's all I would add.
All right, so where do we stand today, or rather, what do we know? We know that Connecticut has some really good strengths, some pockets of excellencies, and you can read them. I'm just going to put out the RISE network, also the FAFSA challenge, and then we have so many towns that are doing really good work. So we have the knowledge of that, but we also know that we have some struggles, some gaps, and some questions. So some of the issues today are dual enrollment is well below our national peers. That's one that bothers me. 108 Connecticut youths are disconnected or at risk, and this comes out again out of the RISE network information. So this is another area that we're looking for feedback. You probably know where some things are being done really well. So we want to add those to the strengths so that we can look at them and make sure that, again, everybody has those strengths, but we also want to know, we have some failing, and we need to get better information in order to fill in those gaps again where we're struggling. So we need your input. What are we missing? What's not on the list? What barriers are there? Because our goal in this session is to fill in the gaps that you might see. So I'll pause there for a minute and see if anybody has any questions or comments.
And actually, in just a moment, we're going to spend some time like fleshing some of those out. So hold your thoughts. And we would love to actually write some of them in here. But I'll turn it over back to Jan for this last one.
So where we stand today, and again, oops, we're going back to this slide. So again, our goal is over the next few weeks to fill in the gaps in our knowledge. So we're going to be honest about what we know and what we don't know. And we're going to look at those buckets, what we suspect and what we need to verify and what we need to look at. So for example, in the advising and navigation, what we suspect is advising quality and capacity vary enormously by district. I think Jennifer put that very well. What we need to verify is district level counselor ratios. What is the ratio of students have that are active, up-to-date student success plans, data on advising outcomes? What other information do we need to verify what we suspect? And then where could we possibly look for in-house data, but also national trends? So I'll give you a minute to just look at those three buckets, what we suspect, what we want, the information we want to verify, and where we think we might want to look for that information. And again, after this meeting, please share any other thoughts that you may have, either research data or where we might want to go.
And
so we
just in the interest, yeah, go ahead, Jana. I think we were
No, I
going
was
to the
just
same
going to
place.
say, just what we want to do now is quickly connect thoughts. And I can give an example of what I was thinking of. But again, this is not one and done. Please, if you have other thoughts and you're driving in traffic going, oh, you know what, I'd really like to know, please just let us know later. But, so some of the bright spots, I would give an example is, the career technology education. Again, my son went through it. I taught in that system. But some areas of needs is, some districts are territorial about access in 7th and 8th grade to get that information to students. So some students don't even know it exists. Not every student can take advantage of the system. Do we need it in more schools? Do we duplicate the pockets of excellence like in New Haven that's doing it very, very well within their district? Or do we need to create some other type of system or expand the system so any student that wants to has access to it? And then, like I said, there's other schools that have pockets of support programs that are excellent. How do we find those support programs from each district, and how do we duplicate the really good ones? And I know that was a lot. Riley's trying to, but this is the type of information that we're going to go through each person. But I think for the sake of time, if you can if you want to take a picture of the screen for the example, please let us know your thoughts. Riley, do you want to go through person by person, or do you want to do that as homework?
I think that let's just quickly say, if there's something that's jumping to mind right away, let's record it here. And then we can take it offline if things continue to percolate. But I think it's helpful just to start surfacing and getting people thinking about, like, what do you already know? What are you seeing? What's going really well and what's not, especially from each of your unique vantage points. So yeah, I'll pause there. If anyone has anything I could populate live as we're talking. Yeah, Jennifer.
I was gonna actually say our CTEC system also. So Jan stole that because they really are like a national leader in what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And if you go to our CTECs, you can see how engaged kids are because they feel like the work they are doing there is a very purposeful. And one of the things I often hear, again, I'm sure this is not going to be a surprise, but there are thousands of kids who want to go to our CTECs that can't. We just don't have the capacity. And so how we can find ways to either expand capacity. I think there's a lot of promise about doing our after traditional school hours, even for adult learners or kids who got, or not kids, our traditional high school graduates who then decide they want to go back and get different certificates through the technical high schools. But how can we get more of what our CTECs are doing so beautifully into our traditional high schools? And again, I'm sorry because I really do think that's very similar to what Jan said.
Think alike.
One area of need that maybe I don't know, you guys can decide whether or not you think this is helpful, but I actually think thinking really strategically about how we can better engage families and guardians is so important. Schools and our teachers and all the wraparound services can only do so much. We've got to find better ways to connect with families. And I don't have like the great answer, but I would love to both engage with research and everyone's expertise here on how we could be doing a better job there. Because I think it's part of the driver in our gross inequities in Connecticut.
That's excellent. I think every teacher in Connecticut would also say that is like one of their major goals all throughout the whole year.
It's really hard.
Yeah, it certainly is.
And I think it's also potentially on the other side going to be a barrier for some families to thinking about career pathways. And so how do we engage families around the education of like what we really mean by career pathways, that it's not just you will become a welder, that it's much broader than that. It might be that you become a welder and that's great, but it also could be a robust career in finance or in healthcare, and sort of the re-education that needs to happen. Larry or Tyler, anything that's jumping out for you that you want to make sure gets recorded?
I think well, let me just pause and see if Tyler has something to say, and then I'll jump in.
I think that a lot of institutions, especially, well, from a higher education standpoint, don't communicate enough to students how advising can help them and what outcomes there are for them. So I think if there's more communication about the advising outcomes and how advising can help them, because there's a lot of resources on the campuses, each of the CSCU campuses has at least one career counselor for them. So there are the resources, it's just they don't see them and they don't see the value of them.
So the bright spot is they're there. The
Yeah.
challenge is getting students to them. Excellent.
The thought that's going through my mind as we think about various sources of data is we might be able to collect all of these disparate sources of data and information, but I'm not quite sure what it would add up to. Or what conclusions we could draw. So I'm sort of thinking about what are the greatest predictors? If we were to approach this as what's the greatest predictors of career pathways success, right? So Jen mentions families, right? So the kind of support that you get within the home is got to be one of those predictors, right? The quality of not only teaching that you get, but the kind of advising outside of your primary grade teacher, whether that is career counseling, whether that is college counseling, etc. The kind of exposure to different careers that you might have is a predictor of. So we might think about this as how do we locate or identify a handful of predictors of career success or career pathway success. And then think about how do we create scale around those so that we touch as many Connecticut students as possible.
Love that.
That makes total sense to me. Like one of the questions we were talking about before, does every child read by the third grade? A perfect indicator.
Yeah.
Correct.
I love that.
In the interest of time, one of the activities that we are going to do is start to think about bold vision making, but I think we don't have time for that, and we suspected that might happen. And so we have prepared around that, which is that we will send out a follow-up email. But these are just some jumping off points of what a bold vision could look like. It doesn't necessarily have to be this, but it's just for inspiration. I would encourage everyone to especially pay attention to this slide because these are some of the models that are happening in other states that are pretty bold, Delaware, New York City, et cetera, that might be good vision sort of inspiration. And then we'd love to collect those ideas from you all. But I just wanted to briefly share out, and thank you so much, Jan, for facilitating that. Briefly share sort of what is going to happen over the next week, because it is going to be a very busy week. So first order of business is that there's going to be this follow-up email with some specific questions, as well as these slides where we'd really like each person to engage. And then in the background, Jan and Madeline and Emily and I are working on these more robust companion documents that will have really in-depth research across each of these three buckets. The first one is going to hopefully come end of day Friday. That will be on the advising counseling bucket. The second one will hopefully come midday on Monday. That will be on the framework for learning bucket. And then the third one will come on Tuesday, and that is on the educator support. So hopefully if each day you could tackle one of them and sort of read through, then on Wednesday, when we have our next meeting, we can have a really robust conversation as a group about like, what did you think about these ideas? Like, where would you, is there a better way to communicate the data? What do you see as the barriers? And we can really narrow down to what we want to present on the 25th. So our next meeting is June 17th. Um, Looking ahead, if you have anything that you want to share with us, anything that you're thinking about after this meeting, please email all three of the co-liaisons, which are Jan, Madeline, Emily, and myself. I am not a co-liaison. I am just helping to build the materials. So please include me or CC me where appropriate. And then the only other thing that I wanted to ask, given that we're at time, is anyone having a hard time accessing the resource library? Because that is a rich trove of documents that if anyone wants to be doing any reading in their off time, that is the place to do so. So if anyone is having issues, please do let me know. Okay. I'm just going to make sure we hit everything, which I think we did, but with that, I am going to adjourn the meeting. And if Michelle, you could stop the recording, that would be great. And I need to figure out how to stop sharing.